that we're having about what we do in this environment. I'm sure that you've attended and heard webinars and just-in-time programming that addresses the many concerns that we have as association leaders of how to navigate what is uncharted. It's been said, and it's so true, that there's no playbook for this. There's no path that's been carved out for us. And so really, we're relying on each other to teach each other the ways that we see in our own organizations and broadly how to navigate these very difficult and troublesome times. But I will say this, on a note of optimism, associations couldn't be more important than they are today. The professions that we serve and the industries that we defend and advance are depending on us to create new knowledge, to carve a path forward, and to do the kind of work that is so important in a crisis like this. And I would say that the kind of collaboration that associations demonstrate as the part of our DNA and pulling people together to solve complex problems and address issues through civil discourse, that's the kind of collaboration that's going to lead to a cure for this pandemic. We will get a vaccine, but we'll do it the way associations do it. We're going to do it together, and we're going to collaborate across all sciences, all geographies, and all people. So I'm proud of that. All of us have been shoved into literally an environment that is unprecedented for us. We're all working remotely. The things that we're used to doing and meeting each other live, association executives and our partners are big huggers. We like to hug each other. We like to greet each other. We like to shake hands and break bread together and be together. It's real hard for us to change that. It's hard for us to break the routines of how we run our offices because they're high touch as well. We're in the people business, and it's hard for us to be out of it for these few weeks and months. So we really need to support each other. And one of the ways we do that is in peer-to-peer learning. We can learn from the experiences of others, and whether or not they have to do with this COVID-19 virus or they have to do with past experiences, I think we're all drawing on reserves, literally and figuratively, to get through this crisis. So what we're talking about today is how do we prepare for the future and how do we see the future? And we're so fortunate today to have 3 panelists with us who are going to give us their own insights into that. And I want to introduce each one in my own context because I know each one of them. And I'm delighted that they can share their experiences with you. The first person I'd like to introduce is Brad Dean, who's the president and CEO of Discover Puerto Rico. And I know firsthand that Brad is made of pretty strong metal. If you think about the things that Puerto Rico has been through in the past several years since he took the helm, and the way in which they've been resilient and come back and been open for business and been so collaborative in trying to get the consensus of this community and others about how to go forward. Brad really exemplifies that kind of open leadership. So we have a lot to learn from him today. We also have Abe Eshkenazi, CSPC, sorry, I messed that up. I'm sorry, Abe, CSCP, CPA, and CAE. I don't get the CAE wrong. He's the Chief Executive Officer for the Association for Supply Chain Management. I think I could stop there and say that Abe's industry is in the crucible right now, so far as dealing with this pandemic and helping our country and the world slowly recover. So he's leading key industries in doing that. But more than that, I know that Abe is an insightful and thoughtful and skilled leader of his own organization to keep his staff and his volunteers guided in the right direction. So we're very fortunate to have you join us today, Abe. And Stephanie Reeves, FASAE and CAE, is the Executive Director of the Maryland Psychological Association. I think it's come to our attention over time that the emotions behind this pandemic, both personal and professional, are profound. And Stephanie has done an amazing job that you'll learn about in helping her members and broader than her members understand the importance of the psychological aspects of dealing with this pandemic. And in addition to that, she's one of those resourceful, multi-hat leaders who leads a smaller organization through a mighty difficult situation like the one we're all faced with. There are so many smaller organizations in our constellation. So Stephanie brings that wisdom of how do you get it all done with a band of 4, I believe that is Stephanie, and act like a big player in a big situation. So each of these folks are going to share perspectives with you in just a moment, but I wanted to just say a word or two about ASAE's own experience as we're navigating these waters. And we're no different than any of you who have joined us today for this program. We are facing the same situation. You know, I think all of you know who are in the community that we just recently announced that we will not be conducting the live portion of our annual meeting. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, it breaks our hearts not to do that, because we were hoping that that would be the time to bring the industry back together, that August would provide that safe haven for us. And unfortunately, it won't. And that has to be what calls the day for us. And it's just not going to be safe enough for us to convene. So we're throwing those hearts and souls into creating a wonderful virtual event for everyone to take place over the same date. So please stay tuned. But we're under siege the same way, the same pressures. There are a lot of uncertainties about membership, the people's ability and trust in participating, the return of our travel industry and our hospitality industry, which has suffered so greatly during this crisis. We're all waiting for those life signs to happen again and to come back to this before we can operate in what we've called, and I think in an overused term, but what else is there, the new normal. And that's what we're waiting to define. And that's what this panel is about today, to give you some insights into what that future looks like and how we can plan for it and be smart about it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Dean to make a few remarks, and then we'll go to each panelist, and then we'll engage in some questions. So please be sure to put your questions in the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on them. And given the right amount of time, we'll pose those to the panel. So thank you so much. And Brad, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you, Susan, so much to you and ASAE for all that you're doing during these crazy times that we're all experiencing. And buenas tardes from your American paradise in the Caribbean, the island of Puerto Rico. It's a real personal privilege for me to join you because I have such a great admiration for what association executives do. While I've never actually led an association per se, I have to tell you, outside of the time I spent at 2 universities, I think the greatest professional development and educational experiences I've had have come from associations and a variety of associations, including ASAE. So I know you know this, but from someone who's a fan and a beneficiary of what you do is so critical in good times and perhaps even more so in these challenging times. And you are the backbone of so many industry associations that provide extraordinary service and experience to their members. So thank you for all that you're doing to help prepare all of us to come back stronger and better out of this crazy crisis. In some respects, my job is a little similar to yours in this regard, is that as a former head of a large regional chamber of commerce and now leading the official destination marketing organization for the island of Puerto Rico, I have the same challenge you have, and that is not only leading an organization, but also being at the helm of an industry where everybody is looking to me and you to explain what do these words new normal mean and how do we chart the course out of this. And so while I can't say I've sat in your seat exactly, I can certainly appreciate with some of the challenges. And as Susan mentioned, in Puerto Rico, we've had no lack of challenges in the just almost 2 years that we have been open. Organization was created to lead the privatization for Puerto Rico of its tourism promotion. And in that role, we serve over 5,100 businesses and represent an industry that employs 83,000 people throughout the island of Puerto Rico. And as hard as it is to imagine and to say this, we thought Hurricane Maria was tough enough. COVID is likely to have 3 times the impact on our local tourism industry that Hurricane Maria had. So we couldn't fathom having 3 Hurricane Marias in 1 month, but that's exactly what we're experiencing. Having said that, there are some things that we've learned in our recent experiences, whether it was dealing with earthquakes, hurricanes, tropical storms, massive political unrest, or now, of course, a global pandemic. And I think a lot of these lessons learned transcend the local tourism industry and destination marketing, and certainly apply to a lot of what you and I are challenged with. The first is we have to be the calm in the storm. There's plenty of negativity. A lot of people naturally lean towards worry and fear. And boy, if you aren't that kind of person, all you have to do is watch the daily news and you'll get your dose of anxiety. But I often feel, and I think you probably do too, like that duck on the pond. It looks cool and calm above the water. Of course, below the water, if you could see the legs, they're paddling fast and furiously just to keep up. But I think that's what our industries need from us right now. And how can I expect my stakeholders to have confidence in me and follow me if I'm not providing that air of confidence and the kind of calm, certain leadership that we need during these times? Second, and I think we all know this, you have to be brutally honest and at times be willing to be a little vulnerable. I think of the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, where he talks about the Stockdale paradox. And Admiral Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war for 7 or 8 years, observed that the people who were least likely to make it out of that tragic situation were those who were guided by unfounded optimism. They said, we're going to be out by Christmas, we're going to be out by Easter, without any basis for that. So what we've tried to do, and what I'm watching working pretty well in our industry, is not giving unfounded optimism. I think people, BS meters, are highly sensitized to that right now. They don't need spin. They don't need just hopeful words. What they really need is honesty and candor. And at times, as a leader, I think it helps to be a little vulnerable and acknowledge what we do and don't know. One of the things that we've found that's worked really well for us, and as I watch my peers throughout my industry who are succeeding and others who it appears may be struggling, I think one of the differences is adapting your communication style and your methodology. For us, we not only increase the frequency of our communication with our staff and our stakeholders, but also the repetition. Normally, in typical times, we might say, we put that out a couple times, let's not bombard them with more. But I found lately, people can't get enough information, and we have to repeat it over and over and over again. So we've increased the frequency and the repetition, and also the time frame. We've really condensed a lot of the typical time frames for our communication cycle. So what was formerly done once or twice a year is now being done every other month. What we were doing quarterly, like our industry updates, are now being done monthly. And even in our staff level, we began with our leadership team having a daily call. And then that's, of course, evolved to 3 times a week, as well as having a regular weekly all-staff meeting. What I've found in past crises, and I think it holds true in this one as well, is when people lack information, they start to make bad assumptions, and they start to worry or fear that they're being left out or they don't have everything. So we've found that you just simply cannot over-communicate. And I'd much rather be accused of over-communicating right now than not providing enough information. A couple other things I think that we've found that have been helpful in past crises, and we're applying it now, is a basic lesson in leadership that we all have to learn at times, and that is to focus on what you can control and influence. And that's incredibly difficult when you're facing these types of circumstances that none of us have been through before. But if you're focused on the things that you can't control, you feel helpless. So what we've tried to do is really focus on what we can control and influence. And admittedly, that's not a lot at times, but it allows us to expand our circle of influence. I often think of the old saying, you can't determine the direction the wind blows, but you can certainly adjust your sails and be adaptable accordingly. And then last, but certainly not least, something that is true, I know in the association world, because so many of you are very, very skilled at that, is we've really decided to lean into the relationships that are important to us, not only to seek help, but to be helpful. One of the first organizations we reached out to was ASAE, because there's such a great wealth of knowledge and experience, not to mention the fact that they have access to so many people. We held a customer advisory board, which is kind of crazy to do in the middle of a global pandemic when everybody's facing this, but we found that our customers were giving us great intel and observations that either affirmed what we thought or made us change some of our thinking and planning accordingly. We've also looked at those in our industry who we know are going to be challenged coming out of this. For example, travel advisors, what we used to call travel agents. A lot of people thought they were going away, but we think actually those travel advisors are going to be trusted advisors for consumers when they begin traveling again. So we figured they're all at home without anything to do. Let's incentivize them to do some educational tours of Puerto Rico, get up to speed on their certification so that when we come out of this, they'll be much better ready to help us sell and promote. At the same time, we know that that's going to be a key not only for ourselves or our businesses. So for us, it's really been a matter of trying to hone in the leadership, apply the lessons learned, and working with and through those key partners on and off island, as well as our staff, to make sure that we're prepared to lead. At the end of the day, it's a lot of things we can't control and influence, but in our industry and our island, we can lead the recovery. So the day the restrictions for tourism began, we began focusing on how do we lead that recovery. And our laser-like focus on that mission, I believe, prepares us to help bring this island forward out of yet another crisis, and hopefully soon to write another amazing comeback story in Puerto Rico.
Thank you so much, Brad. Amazing comeback stories. That's what we're all really hoping for, indeed. Abe, how about from your perspective, what remarks do you have to share about your observations and where we are now and how you see things?
Yeah, I'll take it from two perspectives. I'll take it from our association perspective, and then I'll take it from a association perspective. Supply chain, I think a lot of in the association community will connect with this. Try explaining association management to individuals who are not in our industry. And it takes a little bit of time to have them understand what association professionals do. Layer on supply chain to people 2 to 3 months ago, and it increases the challenge in terms of having to explain what you do to people. In 2 short months, not only do people understand the impact of supply chain, we're having to defend why supply chains are not responding to the surges or the demands in the marketplace, whether for personal protection equipment or food or consumer packaged goods. It has impacted every aspect of our lives. And I think we're recognizing not only the value, but the fragility of the supply chains that support our economy, that support our, everything that we do as a population is impacted by supply chain, from the food to medicine to every aspect of it. And so this has pushed supply chain front and center, but it's also impacted the organization's supply chain and their ability to respond to the changes. So on one side, we're seeing a very positive aspect in terms of people understanding supply chain. On the challenging side, this was a fairly efficient marketplace prior to the pandemic. What we're seeing is the disruption and the lack of preparedness across industries to the surges or to the lack of supplies, whether from a global theater or from domestic suppliers. This has, it's starting to reshape the way that we think about just-in-time delivery, about the products and services that we buy, the food that we buy at a restaurant versus our home. It has affected every aspect of our lives. So in one respects, we've never been more relevant as an association, but as impacted as every industry has been impacted. It is a shock to every system. Shifting to the association management side, I can think of no better time for associations to recognize why they're in business than today. This is the time that we need to provide relevant, factual, timely information to the point that was brought out before by Brad. We need to stay away from opinions. We have a responsibility to share facts. We have a responsibility to share relevant information on a timely basis. And I think this is where associations can really stand out and demonstrate their not only capabilities, but resources. We represent every industry in this world. There isn't an aspect of a legal activity on this world or outside this world that doesn't have an association. And this is the time to stand up and be counted and recognize that you have a role to play to support your members, to support the industries that you serve. And I can think of no better time to be in association management than today.
Thanks so much, Abe. I wish I had, well, I think we are recording this, so that would be good to hear your words again, but relevancy is the key thing. And I think we've all pivoted and stripped away all the things that we thought we needed to do. And now we're laser focused on the things we have to do to add value and to be relevant. So thank you for that. Stephanie, how about your perspective?
Thank you, Susan. So as Susan pointed out, Maryland Psychological Association is a small staff association. There's only 4 of us, but within the last 3 months, it's been as if we were an organization of 10 or more. We really had to, and I know this is a word that we've all heard and we hate at this point, but I'm gonna say it anyway, pivot to adjust to what this new world meant. In the world of psychology, we represent about 1,100 psychologists licensed in and around the state of Maryland. It meant that all of our practitioners had to move to a telehealth platform if they wanted to continue to practice. Now, for some folks, they had already had telehealth set up in their practice, so this was a no-brainer and it was easy for them to adjust. For others, they didn't even own a computer. So for them to then have to shift to seeing patients via, a computer screen was a whole different mindset. Not, forget the technology piece. They had to get themselves comfortable with the idea that they couldn't see their patients in their office. They had to go and see them on a computer screen. And so it was really, what we found our really big role in all of this is helping our members adjust to what their current status, what's currently going on with mental health, and what's going to likely be happening once we get to a point where, you know, we can do some of the things that we had done in the past. One of the first things we did as an association, as we decided that we needed to, you know, shift staff to a telework model, is to do a webinar, not just for our members, but for all psychologists in the state, to give them a perspective of what psychological practice would look like going forward. And our webinars, you know, they typically tend to be fairly small events. We had almost 200 people attend this event. And in the past few weeks, we've done what a lot of associations have done. We've developed a COVID resource page on our website with information not just for our members, but also for graduate students, for members of the general public. We have put together no fewer than 9 additional webinars between April and the end of June, covering topics such as, how do I do assessments in a telehealth model? How do I provide it to kids who are telehealth to kids who are autistic? What are the protocols if I actually do want to go back to my office? And so we've developed all of this different content to benefit, again, not just our members, but also our non-members as well. And just to give you a perspective on, you know, Abe mentioned being relevant and the importance of relevancy, and Brad and Abe just pointed out, you know, the importance of being an association in this space. Over the last 3 months, we gained 27 new members. A quarter of those members were former members who rejoined the association. One in particular who joined us said, and I quote, "You were putting out such great content and I felt guilty not paying for it." And so with very little interaction on our own on actually trying to gain members through all of this, we have been getting people to join the organization because, as some of them pointed out to me, we have become the sole resource on how to do the work that we need to do as psychologists. In Maryland, you're the sole resource. We can't find the information that you have anywhere. And that's been a collaborative effort, not just with our staff, but also with consultants that we've been working with and some of our members who have been really great and beneficial resources to us. And then I wanted to close with a word about how, you know, we've been maintaining as a staff. Again, there's only 4 of us. And I've just told you, we crafted 9 additional workshops to take place between April and the end of June. That's a huge task for any organization, let alone one that just has 4 staff, doing it all from home when we all have our own home life situation. And so, you know, we do weekly check-ins, and I don't call it a staff meeting, I call it a check-in, even though we do talk about business. I want to make sure, and I always start with, how are you doing? How can we help you during this time? We also do a weekly check-in for our members because, again, they've had to change and adjust, and this has been challenging for them. But I have also stressed the importance that even though we are all home, we are still working, and that days off are very important. And I've encouraged the staff to take the day off if you have to, if you need to. And they've taken advantage of it. And in fact, I close the office tomorrow because we've been doing so much work, but we also need to also remind ourselves that we are doing this in the middle of a pandemic. And there's so many factors that we can't control, but the things we can control is our own self-care. And it's really important for associations to stress the need to have your staff, while we are doing and helping each other and helping our members, we must take care of ourselves if we are going to keep our organizations alive and thriving and relevant as we figure out what this new normal is going to be.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I just love what you said about one of the members, or several of them, saying they were feeling guilty for not paying you for the great content. From your mouth to God's ears, that would just be wonderful, because I think a lot of associations have been doing things differently than we ever have before. And by differently, I mean we haven't been charging for it. It didn't seem appropriate. We needed to be of the moment and to be as relevant as possible. So you take a risk when you do something like that. But when you hear a member say, as yours have, Stephanie, that they felt guilty not paying you, that's an ultimate reward. I mean, thinking with our business hats for just a moment, the rewards that we reap by extending our circle beyond our members, I think is something that all of us are learning through this crisis, that everybody's involved. It's an inclusive environment. You need to get these messages out to non-members, to students, to whoever would benefit, and then hope when this begins to turn a bit, that they'll remember that and come back and engage with our association. So I'm glad that that's been real for you. So thank you, all three of you, for very thoughtful remarks. I've heard it said that our work is really going in three layers right now. We're dealing with the crisis, that's one layer, and the other is, as you've all pointed out, we're striving to be as relevant as we can. And at the same time, we have to think about what this is going to look like when we begin to come out. So, Abe, my question is for you. How far out are you planning, and how are you going about that right now?
I think it depends on the particular program or service that we're talking about. If we're talking about events, all our events, our annual is in September. We are fairly close to having to move that to a virtual event. All indications are that events will not take place this year. So that we're looking at 2021 to start planning for our face-to-face events. Our content and our certification, our participant guides, which is the training material for individuals to prepare for the exams as well as the exams themselves, we accelerated those investments into being a digital format. So we had anticipated by the end of 2021, we would be 100% digital. In 2 weeks, we were 100% digital, not only in content dissemination, but the exams themselves. You do not have to go to a Pearson VUE test center to take our exams. So we moved to a completely online format. Then we need to start taking a look at membership, and then you need to start taking a look at corporate services. Each of the line items that we have as an organization is going through a product lifecycle assessment in terms of where are we today and what is the potential for this in the future. In terms of planning horizons, as I said, meetings are a year out, although we've been, as everybody else, contracted for 2 to 3 years out, and most likely a lot of organizations longer. We're finding that renegotiating a lot of the terms and conditions for the meetings are taking place right now. So that is a very dynamic field right now with the hoteliers, travel agencies, convention centers, everybody trying to put together what would be a reopening strategy for cities as well as the events themselves. The short term, the short answer to your question is right now we're about 3 months out, even on the financials. It's hard for us to predict what is going to happen 6 months from now. So we're on financial perspective, about 3 months out. On our products and services, it depends on the types of products that you're talking about.
I think that's good advice. I mean, I'd like to think that we could go further out, but it's very difficult without a whole lot of ifs and thens attached to it. So I
There's
think
just not enough information right now for us to make hard decisions, especially when you take a look at surge and the variation in demand and utilization right now, whether we're talking, pick your industry, from airfare to air travel to food. Every industry is being impacted differently. So it's hard to have a blanket statement either for an industry or a product that this is consistent with other products and services.
Yeah, this is in many ways unique, but I think all we can draw on is the experiences that we've had, whether it was 9/11 or the downturn in 08. Brad, I'm going to turn to you because you have some pretty unique experiences to draw on that you bring to bear in this current situation where hospitality destinations have taken such a drastic and hard hit. Now you've heard from Abe as an association executive how he sees that recovery horizon. What are you all doing in Puerto Rico? One, to learn from things that have happened in the past, other challenges, and that kind of girding yourselves for what you're facing right now.
Yeah, I think Abe, you laid a very key point that none of us can escape, and that is every supply chain is being impacted, and not all at the same pace and not all in the same ways. And while we don't manage the supply chain per se, it affects not only us, but all of the businesses that we serve. So staying in tune to that is critically important. You know, Susan, there's a few things in our fair share of challenges as a relatively new DMO, with several major crises that we've endured just in our first almost 2 years. And I think it's a few things for us. Number one, we treat every one of these as a learning experience. That's hard to say in the midst of it, but we really try to challenge ourselves as a relatively new organization to learn from each of these. So in our case, we did have a crisis playbook prepared, and it did have a plan related to infectious diseases, because we had experienced Zika before. But I'm mindful of the former heavyweight champion Mike Tyson, who prophetically and profoundly said, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the nose. And then, it goes out the window and you have to react and respond. So what our plans enabled us to do was to be able to react quickly. And the other thing, I think this is critically important for small organizations as well as large, to make sure that everybody in the organization knows their role. And in some cases, your role changes dramatically for this. But we tried to make sure that our entire staff knew what was expected of them. We also went really, really far to set expectations for all of our stakeholders, both internal and external, board members, committee members, as well as the general business population. I think, like my job, you probably feel the same way. Even in normal good times, our members and our stakeholders often don't understand what we do and how we do it. So much, much less in this chaotic times that none of us have really experienced. And if they don't understand what we do and how we do it, then shame on us for not making that clear. So we had to set expectations really clearly on what they can expect from us, how they would expect us to proceed and communicate. We also recognize that part of our role, like your role, has to be to foster cohesion. We want to be on a scale of 1 to 10, a 12 in collaboration. And it was interesting to me to see sometimes just asking the simple question, what do you need today and what do you think you're going to need 90 days from now? A lot of us in our industry were so focused on promoting restaurant day or Tuesday takeout day. What can we do to get locals shopping in the local restaurants? And that was helpful. But we've heard from more restaurants that have said, could you just help me figure out this federal financing maze that I can't understand and I don't have the staff and the capability to understand? So it's really sometimes just understanding what you can do to help. And for us, because everybody's a part of the team, it's easy to extend those services without any membership concerns. I think a couple other things that we've learned is as much as we all have to deal with the here and now, this is also a time that you can sacrifice some sacred cows. So we looked pretty quickly early on in this crisis for anything that we knew was not optimal in terms of what we're trying to deliver or how we're trying to achieve, especially as a new organization that's learning and growing. And this is a time to scale back and really focus, laser-like focus on the mission and the delivery of that mission. And then last but not least, we challenged our staff. I certainly don't come at this thinking I've got all the answers. What do you think we can do? What are you hearing is needed? And I think some of the greatest examples have come from this creativity of our staff. One suggested meeting planners are at home, they're still planning, but they can't really do their jobs the way they normally would. Let's send them a bag of coffee. And not only will that help the Puerto Rican coffee farmers, but it'll be a nice gesture. And hey, if they remember us after this, great. But if nothing else, we're helping them get by and recognizing that we appreciate their role. So I think trying to be innovative within the scope of what we can control and influence, all of these, I think, have helped us and able to get a plan in place, revise the plan that we were working with, and go at this knowing that better days lie ahead. And we on our island are going to lead that recovery. And the way we do that is by planning, preparing now.
Thank you so much, Brad. There's a lot of resiliency and creativity in your answer. I think we all need more coffee these days, so that's a good thing. I've also heard it said that we all need a little bit more alcohol. I'm not going to weigh in on that, but there you have it anyway. We got a couple of really interesting questions coming in from our team, and I'm going to throw one your way, Stephanie, and then I've got one for Abe as well. Have you begun, Stephanie, to reopening your offices and a return to work? And that's kind of related to one that we had kind of planned to talk about, which is keeping the team busy and so forth. So, what are your plans along those lines?
So so our building management came to all of us a week ago to give their plan. And based on that, we met as a staff. And again, we're small. So our particular office, we're not extremely concerned about the day-to-day. However, we work in a large office building with over 500 staff. And the way the office is set up, it doesn't allow for much social distancing. So there are still some challenges to going back into our office that we as a staff that we are currently looking to address. And funny, I just had our monthly board meeting last night and told the board that even with what our management company is advising, it still doesn't provide enough safeguards for not only myself and our staff, but also any guests coming into our office to do that. From a membership perspective, our members are having those conversations on a number of different levels. Our listserv has been exploding with many questions about what that looks like. And again, you're talking about people who, if you think about what the therapy model is, it's someone in an office less than 6 feet away talking to someone else. And having to do it on a screen presents a number of different challenges. And so we have started developing a workshop along those lines where we're bringing in an infectious disease expert to talk about the protocol for our private practice folks in terms of how to set up their office, how to set up their waiting rooms. We have a member who is actually preparing to reopen her office and will have the benefit of having that person on the panel to review her plan and give her insight and coverage. And then the other piece from that perspective is the ethics and risk management concerns that are replaced. What if a patient comes into an office, even though all the protocols are there, and it is learned that that person had contracted COVID and could be traced back to potentially going to that office? What are the risk management? What are the legal ramifications? What are the ethical ramifications? And so those are some of the questions that we help to seek to get answers for our members, because those are the really big challenges that they face in doing it. And a lot of our members are still just, you know, they're concerned about not doing it, but we also have a number of psychologists that can't practice because the nature of their work doesn't lend itself to a telehealth model. So how do we help them potentially go back in a way that's safe for everyone? How do we make sure the public is safe going to their mental health professional, and really trying to find those answers? And again, I think that's where associations have been very strong in. It's helping people find the answers that they're not going to find anywhere else. Right. And that's where we've really been able to show our strength in this.
That's just so important because, you know, we've talked for years now about how a lot of our knowledge and the content that we thought belonged to us as associations has become ubiquitous. And now is the time where reliable, truthful information is at a premium. So what better role can we play than to be that source? So thank you for saying that. And, you know, Stephanie, it's interesting because you're playing that dual role of comforting people who are giving other people comfort and helping them through this, and then guiding your staff as well. So that's a pretty full plate. So we've got I'm doing I hate to use the word pivot, but I'm going to use it. We've got a really interesting question, and I'm throwing it to you, Abe, because you kind of opened up Pandora's box here. So if you're on a short planning horizon, if you can go out 3 months, how do you explain that to the board?
You better have had a good relationship with your board before you entered this pandemic. This disruption is going to expose a lot of the challenges and or sort of benefits of having a good trust-based relationship with your board. Communication is critical today, but it's also understanding what your board is going through. I'll give you an example. We had our virtual board meeting about 3 weeks ago. And as the first board meeting of the year, as the board members were going around the table, you heard the same consistent story. We've had to lay off staff. We've had pay cuts. We're looking at another reduction in force. You know, if this goes into August, September, we're looking at further reductions in our staff. And it was very doom and gloom for a number of the board members. Right next to this individual is another board member saying, I have to pay stay bonuses. I can't find enough workers. He's in logistics, warehousing, and distribution. And he's saying there just are not enough people that I can hire. And so this is the duality or the quilt of the impact that it's having on the companies that serve and the members that serve on our board. So having them understand what the association is going through different than their organizations is the first impact statement that you need to have, because what we go through is not reflective of what their organizations go through. So we have to separate the conversation about the association first. Secondly, we need to be honest and transparent with the board. So we provided them last year a contingency plan on what happens if a recession hits. Obviously, we had absolutely zero idea of a pandemic. Ours was more focused on, for the past few years, we've done some scenario planning on what happens if there's a 5, 10, 20% reduction in the economy, and that we contract 5, 10, 20%, and the actions that we take. Well, we got to that 20% fairly quickly within the first month, but it also gave us the playbook on what we are going to do with the board. So it wasn't a schism that we were coming to them and saying, here are the things that we're going to do. We had a 9-step plan that we impacted, or that we affected immediately. To Brad's point, we planned for specific disruptions. I can guarantee you nobody planned for a pandemic. And as we come out of this and start to plan for the pandemic, we will never get hit with the same type of disruption again. So the flexibility and agility that you need to respond to the challenges, and being able to communicate to your board about the actions that you're taking and why it's necessary to have a short-term, medium-term, and long-term perspective to the decisions that you're making today will get you the space that you need to make and affect the decisions as an exec today. So importantly, open, honest communication with the board. Let them know upfront what you're considering and the assumptions that you're using to make your forecasts. I can also tell you that every forecast that everybody prepares is 100% wrong. There is very few forecasts that hit plan, but you have to understand that these are scenarios. There is no one forecast. There are a number of different scenarios that you can present to your board. What you have to do is show them that you're, being considerate about why you're making the recommendations that you're making, and more importantly, the basis of decisions for reductions in staff, for salary adjustments, for hiring, because as you're reducing staff, you may have critical positions that cannot be left vacant. So this is not just a function of reducing all costs, irrespective of the market. Segment the opportunity between short-term, and to us, it's 3 months, and this is as much as we can forecast out right now. Midterm to us is 6 to 12 months, and then long-term is 18 months plus. So we've separated our decisions relative to that criteria, and then break it down by your members, by your products and services, financial, operations, governance. Each one of them has to have a plan on how you're going to affect it. Most likely, we will not have a board meeting this year, face-to-face. Most likely, it'll all be virtual. So you have to start to see the board in terms of, we're going to have not an 8-hour board meeting, we're going to have a 4-hour board meeting. And we're not going to get an opportunity to share information the way we have in the past. So each of the impact on your operations need to be evaluated relative to short, mid, and long-term impact. And then hopefully the decisions that you're making in the short and the medium term support long-term strategies. Not always the case, but you hope that it does.
Right. Abe, you've touched on so many things. We have a question in the hopper that I want the three of you to be thinking about before I pose it to you. And that is something that you touched on, Abe, which was about how to take action about reducing staff. And so that's a very tough question. And I think as CEOs, you can offer our audience some insight into how you handle that skillfully, because it's a hard thing to handle skillfully. But in the meantime, I'm going to draw off of a theme or a mention that Stephanie made about getting her office and her employees and her members ready to kind of return to business. And Brad, I'm going to throw this one to you. We've got offices that we have to assure safety for workers when they return. And we have buildings that we have to align with in that as well. You have an island. So what in your world will be the key signals that it's safe to come back and stay in a hotel, or to be in an airport, or to come back and have a meeting? We all know that the airlines they're running anyway, but we need to feel comfortable getting on a plane. We know that. And we know that certain signals from our states and our government need to be in place, and certain medical assurances need to be in place. Those are the things that we truly cannot control. But as you think about your island, what would be the main things that you're doing to assure safety to people who would come to Puerto Rico for a meeting?
Yeah, you know, Susan, for those of us in the travel and tourism industry, this is really a new area for us, as strange as that may sound to say. For us, safety has largely been focused on preventing tourism or other acts of terror. Most of us have not had to navigate that intersection between travel and public health because we've had standards in place to do that. And now I think we've all realized that those standards, while important, aren't sufficient for a global pandemic like this. So it's challenging all of us to react and respond quickly. I think first it started with us recognizing that public safety and public health has to be the top priority. And so we on the island of Puerto Rico, having had a little experience with the Zika virus, at least knew to take this seriously. And our governor and our local government health officials stepped out very, very quickly. At the time, there was some criticism, people wondering if this was an overreaction, but they recognized that being on an island, there's a lot of disadvantages. One advantage is if you can create a biological barrier, then you not only protect the health and well-being of your residents and visitors, but you enable a quicker recovery cycle. So we implemented a number of things earlier. In fact, I think our local airport, San Juan International, was one of the first to implement the thermodynamic temperature scanning. We implemented COVID testing at the airport. We used a number of other measures. Of course, you know, the quarantining and the work from home restrictions by closing all but the most essential businesses, but also implementing a curfew. So all of these, while appearing perhaps drastic and early on, have enabled Puerto Rico to fare fairly well in terms of the numbers and the spread of COVID. We've also used this time, this downtime, if you will, to work with our industry to recognize that we have to change the way we navigate this. And for us at Discover Puerto Rico, it was really stepping out of our role as the promoter to encourage you to come to Puerto Rico and thinking about it from the perspective of a traveler or a meeting planner. All along that continuum, you know, if the hotel has great cleanliness and sanitation procedures, that won't matter if the restaurant or the taxi cab or the Uber driver don't. So we really looked at the whole continuum, and this is where having customer advisory board meetings and staying in sync with our partners was so helpful, because meeting planners have a critically important role. They're responsible for the entire group's well-being and experience. So we tried to look at it from their perspective and challenge the status quo. Everything from not reusing menus to replacing tablecloths after every sitting at a restaurant. All of this to give the assurance that we are ready to protect your health and your safety when you come. In some respects, we kind of paraphrase Jerry Maguire. Show me the cleanliness, show me the hygiene, show me the sanitation. And those are typically operations that in the hospitality industry, while they're important and we uphold those, we don't necessarily want to showcase those. It's typically not something we would promote, but now we realize we have to do so. I think, of course, in Puerto Rico, being a part of the United States also helps us. We've got more Walmarts and CVS's than you can imagine. So we're really drawing upon that base of US healthcare standards, which I think will help enable us to come back even more quickly for those who might have considered going outside the US for meetings or vacations, but now will come here. All of this comes down to really making it a priority, stepping outside your normal role and thinking at it from the perspective of the traveler and the meeting planner, and then really challenging ourselves to meet the highest standards of cleanliness, sanitation, and hygiene so that you can be certain that when you come to Puerto Rico, whether for a meeting, a vacation, a getaway, that health and safety are our priority, and you know you'll be safe when you come and visit.
Sounds good. You know, there are a couple of questions that are popping up, and I think, Brad, the comments that you just made touch on them. They have to do with what are the signals or trigger points that we know need to be in place in order to feel confident to travel safely and to get back out there with face-to-face meetings or even our own vacations, which admittedly probably are overdue given all of the things that we've been faced with. But one of the attendees is challenging us, and I want to get back to the staffing issue, is whether or not we agree with Abe's suggestion that all meetings should be canceled for 2020. And I just want to qualify that. I'll give you an opportunity to, Abe. I didn't hear you say that. I just think what I thought I heard you say is that if the meeting is virtual, it's probably face-to-face is what's in question through 2020, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's correct. And this is for us, our organization, because you have to take a look at it relative to your member. I mean, I will not speak for the association community. Every organization needs to evaluate their meetings based on the criteria that Brad set out, and each organization's criteria in terms of what a safe, effective, meeting would look like. From our perspective, because we are global in nature, we don't believe that international travel will be as accessible in the August-September timeframe. And that's one of the reasons that we're evaluating whether we need to reschedule our meeting for September. Every organization is different. The majority of the companies that we're talking to right now, these are the organizations that would send attendees to the events. All indications from our customers, again, being close to the customer, talk to them, reach out to them and find out what their perspective is. The majority of the organizations have indicated that they would not be reacting positively to having to send their members today based on the current information. And again, this is a fluid situation. If we are, fortunate enough to develop a vaccine or a treatment protocol, then there are different decisions that need to be made. But based on the information that we have today for our organization, we do not believe that we would be able to successfully execute or run an event in the manner and in the fashion that attendees expect through September or October of this year.
Thank you. That's important clarification. Stephanie, with a staff of 4 people, the idea of reducing staff is probably not on your mind, but what I'd like to ask you as context for others who might be considering something like that is, what do you think is going to change forever or for the foreseeable future in your organization coming out of this crisis? What are the things that you think won't snap back as being your routine or your norm?
That's a great question, Susan. I would have to say that's really interesting for us because I think most people would think, well, your folks are probably going to, now that they've been working comfortably at home, they would want to maintain that. And I can't say for my folks that that's going to be the case. We like seeing each other on screen, but we really like the camaraderie of being in an office together. So I think, a lot of organizations are looking at possibly, going to an all virtual model. That might not be our norm going forward. What it may mean, what it has probably meant for us is that we can probably have more virtual activities going forward, where we would normally have people who would not be comfortable, doing a virtual webinar like this, who are now comfortable with the technology and can do it. The other thing that's been interesting, with us is, we've had to do our board meetings are monthly, and so we've had to do the last 3 or so virtually. And interestingly enough, our board members tend to like this format better than what we've been doing, which was a hybrid in person and then have people Zoom in if they couldn't come into the meeting in person. They like having the virtual model. It's not cumbersome for them to all be online at the same time. We've been able to actually, I would say, even be more productive in our board meetings. We tend to be, keep on time a lot better. So I would say if there's any change, it's, possibly having more board and committee meetings where, maybe there's a couple of meetings a year where we're together in person, but for the majority, it's doing it in this mode. So those are some of the things that I think we will see some changes for. But going back to the question of staffing and such, obviously, I think for us, we, want to kind of keep an eye on that. We're 4, so we have 3 full-time and 1 part-time person. And so obviously I need, going forward, if we need to make adjustments, we can do that. But that would be to the extent, because I think if we were to even lose 1 person, what we've been able to accomplish now, even with the 4 we have, which is a lot of work, would definitely suffer by a reduction of staff. And so we are working very hard to make that a very last resort effort for us to do in terms of having to do any type of staff reduction.
I totally anticipated that as your answer. And so that's why I was asking you the question about what is going to change
Mhm.
for whatever forever is. But I've heard it said by some very smart people that we're all going to come back to our work environment and kind of interview for our own jobs again, because the work will have changed. And so I'm going to, we don't have much time left, but I want Abe and Brad to weigh in on this. What do you see changing almost forever? And the context for that is some questions about staff reduction, but I don't want to look at that in isolation as a solution, a means to an end, but rather, how has the work changed? How has our strategy changed for however far out we can see that? And so what are you planning when you come back to what would be normal by opening your doors and having everybody back? How's the work going to change? What's going to last? Brad, I'll go to you first, and then we'll wind up with Abe.
Sure. Well, I think we can all probably agree I think the age of hybrid meetings is probably upon us and not going back. A lot of associations will follow the direction that Abe mentioned, where they just can't, it's not feasible to meet. And what we've been talking to meeting planners, what does success look like for you? If you can meet in person, how do we make that work for you? If you can't, how do we become a great partner in helping you eventually plan a hybrid meeting? And I think in the workplace, the same thing. There were jobs that we didn't think could be done work from home, and we had about 20% of our workforce working from home that we now realize with the right digital delivery and adapting to that probably can be done. Although I got to admit, I haven't heard too many people say they're so glad they're not having to go to the office and never go to meetings again. So I think some of this will come back. A lot of what we're talking about is obviously pre-vaccine, but there's some things that won't change. One of the things we found in motivating our staff is to remind them that even in the midst of a global pandemic, you are important. You've got a role, you've got a purpose. And I think knowing your why transcends a lot of challenges and has helped us rebound from adversity. We started out with telling the staff, look, people aren't going to travel for a while, but it doesn't mean it can't be inspired. And gosh, you can only watch so many episodes of The Tiger King and The Last Dance. So, salsa dancing lessons from home and Puerto Rico cooking lessons and yoga lessons on the beach. And these weren't things we told our staff, let's do. These are ideas that our staff came up with, recognizing that our job is still to promote and inspire and help spread the travel as a force of good and a transformative force for good in this world that we need today more than ever before. And while our role changes, our mission doesn't change. And what I've found is really throughout our organization, from the tops right down to the lowest levels of the organization, everybody has adapted and responded and figured out how to do that because we were so clear on the why and the purpose. So I think that doesn't change. How we deliver the work certainly I think is going to change somewhat, and especially in the pre-vaccine level, where I think we're all going to be dealing with this for a while longer.
That's a great answer. And I think as you strip it all down, that mission is really the core to how we go forward. Thank you, Brad. Abe, what about you? What's going to change forever here?
On the association side, I think we're all become very accustomed to the new gig economy and working in different modalities. To Stephanie's point, there is not a one-size-fits-all. I think you've got to evaluate how you can effectively accomplish the tasks that you have while being flexible with your workforce. Some individuals are going to run back to the office. I know my CFO with his 4 girls underneath the age of 9 can't wait to get back into the office. There's a couple of individuals that have already asked, can I continue my work at home schedule after this? So every individual is unique. And I think that's one of the things that we have to embrace here. This is a global pandemic, but yet the impact on every individual is different. No two individuals are facing the same challenges. No two organizations are facing the same challenges. So we're going to see significant changes in terms of the relationships with employees and the way that we facilitate meetings and our work. Products and services, if you're not moving to a digital transformation, you're behind the curve. Now is the time to start focusing on digital transformation. We're going to see survivors and thrivers. Organizations that were well-funded in the past will be able to withstand this, maintain, and then come out flourishing on the backside of this. We'll probably see lighter governance structures and probably, to Stephanie's point, much more nimble governance relationships with our board and different ways to interact with the board. We're learning as we go about this and what sticks and what is part of a short-term response versus what sticks is going to be different for each organization, and that's based on the relationships with your staff, the relationship with your board, the relationship with your members, and the community at large. On the supply chain side, it's going to be a whole new world on the backside of this, and I, like everybody else, hope that this is a memory much sooner than later.
That's well said. I imagine people who do scenario planning are going to make a fortune in the future.
Yep.
So here we go. So to the person who asked about reducing staffing, I hope that the context of what's going to change will help you answer that question, help all of us, because we have a choice at this point as CEOs to have our selections made or driven by finances or driven by a vision or a strategy. And probably it's a little bit of both, because that's one of the more tender and difficult areas that we all have to deal with in this environment. And that is the reason we have reserves, by the way. I've
Yep.
said often, and I mean this is the rainy day. And so if we have to draw on reserves and build them back up, the challenge is building them back up. But we need to sustain ourselves through this period of time, because the work we do is absolutely critical to this world. So we are out of time. I've run over time because I'm so interested in everything the three of you have to say. But I want to thank our panelists very much for your wisdom and your ideas. The comments that I'm seeing are very supportive of the ideas that you've shared. And it's nice to see a destination and our CEO community together to decide how we're going to come back together, because that is the absolute end product for all of us. Nothing would make us happier to be sinking our toes into the sand in Puerto Rico and feel safe doing so, and having our boards doing something else, and all the things that we know and love. So thank you, Puerto Rico. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Abe. Thank you, Stephanie, very much. This will be recorded, or has been recorded, not will be, otherwise we would have missed that opportunity. And it'll be on the coronavirus resource page on the ASAE website within a week. So please refer back to it. We have more just-in-time broadcasts coming up. On Thursday, May 28th, 3 to 4 Eastern, will be the name of our webcast will be the Association Recovery Plan. We've touched on that a lot today already. As always, ASAE is here to serve you, to help you, and to connect you with each other. Because right now we're learning more from each other than anybody else, and we appreciate that. So keep in touch. Know that we are going to do more of this, and thank you again to our panelists. Everyone be safe. That's our big wish for everybody. And take care. So we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Susan.
Uh-huh.
Thank you, Susan.